Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. That is right. After a decent little hiatus here, we are back with a Matt Law special during this international break. The last one, Matt. It's the last international break for, I don't know,
A
2
long
or 3
time, a
months.
long time. Then the fixtures go crazy when we're back. Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
crazy.
So we are almost there. Just one more week of this international break, and we're back playing some football. But how are you doing? What's going on with you since the last time that we talked in mid-October?
Yeah, good. Been doing a bit of Chelsea, a few long-term projects on the go, trying to get my head around all the sort of juggling with the Champions League and everything. I'm not on the international beat this week, so I'm watching from afar. So that's quite nice for a change, rather than travelling all over the place. But yeah, keeping on.
Well, obviously, lots to get to because there's been quite a bit of news since we last spoke. But reminder, kind of closing in on sign up deadline. We are going to London. It is going to be a hell of a lot of fun. We're going over from the 27th of December to the 4th of January. Actually, the 5th of January. Now they moved the city match fixture. We're going to go up to Manchester for that one, which would be a heck of a lot of fun. So if you have any questions or you want to potentially sign up, hit us up, contact at londonisbluepodcast.com. Who knows? May even see old Matt Law doing a live show at Classic Football Shirts. So lots to get to, Matt, to start this one off. Just talking about the form guide first. Chelsea end this stretch of 7 fixtures from October to November before this international break in kind of odd but semi-decent spot. 9 out of 12 points in the league, sitting third right behind City and 6 points behind Arsenal. And in the Champions League, maybe not as rosy, 12th in the Champions League league phase table. Seems kind of unlikely at this phase that they make the coveted top 8 in that fixture. What did you make of these results? Right, you have a 3-0 win against Forest for what turns out to be Ange's last game, a dominant win over Ajax, which was just kind of silly, a terrible loss against Sunderland at home, a chaotic win in the League Cup against Wolves on the road, a solid victory over Spurs on the road, a very poor performance against Karabag on the road, and then an up and down performance that ends up in a 3-0 win against Wolves at home in the league. It's just kind of one of these.
Yeah, I think your description of the Spurs one is a bit harsh. The solid. I thought that was an excellent win because that would be the only game of that group where I think they've played a very, very good 90 minutes.
Okay.
I think in their other wins in that run of games, I mean, I'm discounting Ajax. Ajax were just woeful. It's impossible to draw anything from that Ajax game other than, going on about the youth of Chelsea again, because obviously a lot of young players did well. But in the other victories, they kind of won with one good half of football in all the other victories. At Forest, they could have been out of it in the first half, then excellent second half and wiped the floor with them. Wolves, not terrible first half, but struggling to make chances first half, and then kind of wiped the floor with them in the second half. The Tottenham one I thought was a real 90-minute performance. I thought it was a really excellent 90-minute performance. So that's why I really like that one. That's why I think you're a little bit harsh there. But you're right, it's a bit up and down. I think I'd predicted them to drop 2 points in that run of games in the Premier League, and they've obviously dropped 3. And I didn't see it coming at home at Sunderland, although perhaps with hindsight I should have done, because I had seen Sunderland this season and seen that they're actually very physical and very good and a potential banana skin for a lot of teams. Arsenal have just tripped up away at Sunderland. That's not to excuse the performance, by the way. So a mixed bag. I think Premier League-wise, they'll be happy with where they've landed, though. 20 points, I think, is a couple of points up on last season. So, when you talk about wanting to see progress, there's a bit of progress there. I also think because of the nature of the league, 20 points places them quite well in the league this season, because a lot of teams have had quite an odd time in the league. And I think they'll be relatively happy with that, albeit obviously regretting some home drop points. I think home is the issue. Champions League, I agree, they've left themselves an uphill. I mean, they're gonna have to take something somewhere where we weren't really expecting it. Having said that, Barcelona at the moment at home maybe doesn't look as tough as it did at the start of the season because their form is patchy. And you're laughing at me,
Oh,
but
man.
their form is patchy, and I mean, I watched their last Champions League game, a crazy game in Bruges, because it was so much fun, and I decided to put that on, and that was wild. That was wild, and I really enjoyed it. But I watched it thinking, I'd certainly back Chelsea to score. It's just whether they can keep the door shut the other end, which I think we're going to come on to. So, well placed in the Premier League. I think they'll be pretty satisfied Premier League. I think they might be a tad disappointed Champions League. They've got to pick up a result somewhere where maybe we thought it was going to be tough to.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we talked in October about Enzo Moresca's kind of up and down
Yep.
managerial performance through October. What do you make of how he is adapting? In this run of fixtures, right? I mean, you have a couple of relatively comprehensive results in here that were simple and straightforward. You are way up on Wolves in the League Cup and allow that hapless team to come back and really challenge you. Obviously, the Sunderland result was looking really great, and then it kind of fell apart at the end. It seems like to me every good or solid performance is kind of followed with some struggle, and I don't know if that is just the cycle that Chelsea are in, being a really young team, or if that is just a combination of an experience from the manager and experience from the players, and what we'll talk about in a little bit, which is all the injuries kind of catching up at the same time. Do you have a diagnosis of what Enzo's maybe going through right now?
Well, I think the narrative that's built around Enzo in this little group of fixtures, which I think is interesting, is the rotation policy.
Mm.
And I think it's both. I think he's both got it right and wrong,
Mm-hmm.
which I'll explain. I do think he has to rotate. I support a bit like the club. I support his rotation. I think it's intelligent. You can't just go hell for leather, play the same team every week. You'll get to February and crash. We've seen it. They've not had the European thing, but if you look at the way Bournemouth approach seasons, they go hell for leather, run, run, run in the early weeks, have a lot of good early results, tend to crash later in the season. It'll be interesting with Palace whether that happens to Palace as well, whether they crash, because they're basically playing the same team through Premier League and Europe. And they started well, and they've tailed off slightly just lately. And I think you really have to be wary and careful of that. So I think he's fully doing the right thing in rotating, but I think he's getting some of his rotation wrong within that. I think there's too much rotation, too much regular rotation. And by that, I mean he's making like 7 or 8 changes between most midweek and weekend games. That is really tough to sustain any sort of consistency or momentum through that. I remember years ago, we used to be lucky enough years ago when I used to cover a bit of Arsenal to have off the record time with Arsene Wenger at their training ground. And he sat down with us. He was always fascinating, whether you like Wenger or not like Wenger. I appreciate Chelsea fans probably don't like him that much. He is a fascinating man to sit down with, and whether you agree with him or not, quite frankly. And we were talking to him about a European tie, and I remember very vividly him talking us through the fact that he felt any more than 4 changes becomes a risk. Now, that's not to say he didn't ever make more than 4 changes. He must have done. But he was very much of the opinion that more than 4 changes within a rotation becomes a risk because you can't keep up the relationships, you can't keep up the chemistry, you take away that momentum and you take away that fluency. And when I look around how other managers are approaching the midweek to weekend changes, Villa did 7 a couple of weeks ago and lost at Go Ahead Eagles, which was a terrible result. But Unai tends to sort of do 4 or 5. And certainly in the Champions League, no matter who you're playing against in the Champions League, you take a very big risk. So I think he's making too many every time. And I also think some of the ways he's doing it in positions is difficult. So I think we're going to come onto the defence more forensically later. But he's chopping and changing his centre-back pairing virtually every game. Like, I've just looked at it before we came on air, and at the start of the season, there was a run of 4 games where Chalobah and Tosin played together. But then for the last however many games since then, 10 or so games, they've barely kept the same. Enzo hasn't. I think he's kept the same centre back pairing once after that, and he's just changing them every single match. And I don't know whether that's to do with a lack of faith from him and his centre backs, whether he's struggling a little bit with the choice back there. Obviously now Fofana's fit, that comes into the equation. But I think that is having an impact on Chelsea. And I also think that when we talk about some of the chaotic nature of some of their matches, particularly that Wolves match, yes, it's a bit to do with the youth and a fair bit to do with the youth, but also it's also got to be to do with the rotation and the constant chopping and changing. And I want to sort of reaffirm the fact that I think rotation is the right thing to do. He has to rotate. I'm just not quite sure he's quite got it down to a T yet, and that's understandable. We've spoken before on this pod many times. He is a coach who's learning at this level. He's never managed a Champions League campaign before. He's never managed in 4 competitions. Well, he has managed in 4 competitions before because he did it last season. But bringing in an elite competition, you could make 10 and 11 changes in the Conference League. Making 7 or 8 changes in the Champions League is tough, and then having to change again for the Premier League makes that tough.
I think this is kind of the point I would go on rotation is like last year you had whole team switch outs, right? So like I think in training that becomes a lot easier to prepare for when hey, I'm part of the Premier League team or I'm part of the cup team. And whichever that was, like you start to build familiarity. If you're Philip Jorgensen, that you have a chance to start midweek instead of at the weekend. Same with your center back pairing, same with midfield, same with everything. Like Dewsbury Hall plays a lot last year, right? Because he knows that you have to give Caicedo and Enzo a break, and so you're going to step up and play that role. I think he's struggling a little bit because it's not the full complement, maybe. And so you have weekend guys still playing these midweek games, especially the Champions League games, who are like probably gassed, and then you bring in these new guys, and it's not the same. It's not the same full
I
rotation.
understand. There's definitely merit in what you're saying there. I think because if you have sort of a B team as such that you draft in, they do have relationships at least. It's not like you're just throwing everything back up into the air again. So I get what you're saying completely, but obviously with the Champions League, you just can't possibly do that. If you look at when the rotation kicked in as well, the really big rotation is obviously around the Bayern Munich tie. So when the Champions League starts is where this philosophy comes in. He's had mixed results after Champions League weekends. He's won a couple. He's lost a couple. So he's clearly learning on that. He's clearly yet to settle or quite work out what the best way of approaching it is. And this is going to be really interesting now because obviously after the restart, they go to Burnley and then it's Barcelona. Now you can't possibly not play your strongest team against Barcelona. It would be absolute insanity. You have to play your strongest team against Barcelona. So does he therefore play the sort of Carabag team versus Burnley? Or does he actually decide, right, well, I'm going to have a week or two where I actually play a settled side, and if they're tired, they're going to sort of have to get through it, and we'll hope we can make changes within matches. I don't know what he'll do, but it'll be interesting to see because previously it's been quite easy to predict where he will rotate. I actually think, this is captain hindsight, and it might not have worked. would he have been better playing the Karabag team at home to Wolves and the Wolves team away at Karabag? Because given Karabag's results in the Champions League, and we did talk last time that they've proved themselves to be a little bit of dark horse in the group phase of upsetting teams, Karabag away should be a tougher game than Wolves at home. So, in captain hindsight, should he have actually flipped his philosophy there? My honest answer is I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know this to be true yet, but I think after this, next run of fixtures into kind of the festive period, that we'll have a better idea that we'll know if Chelsea is able to effectively cope in both competitions or not, right?
I mean, they
And
should be able to cope. They should be able to cope. I mean, I
you
give
think
them
so?
I give them a lot of leeway for the Club World Cup in the summer. Although, ironically, I give them leeway on that, and the club don't like you talking about the effects of the Club World Cup in the summer, which I get. They feel it's backward facing. They feel it gives excuses. They don't want that. I get that. That's a good theory that they don't want to create an excuse culture on the back of the Club World Cup. Fine. I give them a bit of a get out there, but they should, with that the amount, and I know they've got a lot of injuries, but with the squad they have, they should be able to cope with the rotation of the Premier League and the Champions League. I just don't think he's quite figured it out yet.
Yeah, I mean, the results will tell, though, right? Like, what
Yeah, for sure.
if you
And
are
the,
in if you're like top four still in the Premier League, and you're right now we're 12th in the Champions League. If you're comfortably in that kind of middle set, and you're playing the extra two legs in January or whatever, February, whatever it is, like, then it kind of is what it is, and you didn't really do a terrible job, but you didn't do a great job in the Champions League,
well,
right?
the irony of it is obviously is that by resting players in the league phase with the big rotation, you could end up costing yourself two extra games at a time of the season where no one wants two extra games. I think I might have said this on the pod before that in an England interview, Harry Kane said that those two games against Celtic, when Bayern Munich actually almost went out to Celtic, he just said having to play the two extra games then at that time of the season was hideous,
Yep.
and getting the squad both physically and mentally in a good place for that was really, really tough. And he was talking about basically the fact that Bayern weren't going to make the same mistake again. And, it doesn't look like they will.
Sure,
And
sure
so
doesn't.
so it will be an irony if we look back and think that through heavy rotation now they cost themselves two extra games later down the line. But that's not a given yet. They're well alive in that top eight race. And the long nature of the Champions League phase and the European League phase means that you can slip up and you can recover from that. So I think it's probably only right to properly. We obviously should debate it and should critique it, and everyone's allowed an opinion. In terms of drawing conclusions, we're going to have to wait until that Champions League group phase is probably over to work out whether he worked it out and whether he did what the right thing really.
Yeah, you mentioned the defense earlier, and I think that is something I want to hone in on really quick. Obviously, the substitution and the rotation is puzzling at times with the center backs.
Yeah, I agree.
You have someone like Josh, who I think this season has played very, very well. Limited opportunities in this run of fixtures. However, at Karabag, you have Jarell Hatto starting as one of your center backs. It was a tough moment, obviously, for him. I
Yeah.
think a learning experience for him. I think he did better in the second half than he did in the first half, but it's would seem like, man, that's a missed opportunity to play a center back who's playing very well alongside a center back who he has played well with. Obviously, the Batty Shield injury kind of threw every bit of planning into the spanner a little bit, but Tosin's performances have dropped significantly. You have a really good performance from Fofana against Tottenham, which ends up being a really bright spot in here, and then you have some just calamitous defending along the way as well. What do you make out of the center backs at this moment? How do you see it evolving? And
So
obviously, like, are we in a situation where Moresca is going to the club and being like, "Hey, I told you we needed personnel."
yeah, look. just on Hato, my only theory behind the Hato starting, because I agree with you, my only theory was that Hato has an awful lot of European experience with Ajax. And my only thought that I wondered was whether Enzo thought that European experience would be useful for him. Obviously, it backfired. That was literally the only way I could reason that out, because I didn't really get it either, quite frankly. And it's been quite clear since he joined that they see him probably more as a left back as well. So that was odd, and it didn't work. The centre backs I find really interesting, because Chelsea have got the worst defensive record in the top six of the Premier League, only just, but they've conceded 11 goals, which is more than anyone else in the top six. And they're the only club in that top six that, when everyone is sort of fit, or most people fit, will still keep changing their centre backs. And I couldn't really tell you. I think I could guess that maybe Fofana and Chalobah are his first choice if he had a cup final tomorrow and Colwill was still injured. I think Fofana and Chalobah would be his first choice, but can't say that with full confidence. And it's probably now the only area of the team where, again, if you were to ask me to name his strongest team, centre back would be the real one where I'd struggle on, because I don't think he knows it, if I'm honest with you. I don't think he's settled on a strongest partnership, and I don't think he's fully comfortable with any of the partnerships. There seems to be a doubt in his mind on all of them. I don't know whether he's trying to send a message to the board through the constant chopping and changing. If he is, I don't think that's very clever. So I hope he's not doing that. I always think that sending messages through boards through selection is coaches being silly and ending up shooting themselves in the foot. So I hope he's not doing that. But managers have been known to do that in the past. But certainly, I don't get the impression he feels that one of the partnerships without Colwill is quite right. And it's not helping the guys. Like, I really think that the Sunderland goal with Tosin and Chalobah, I do think that's partly down to, I mean, obviously, was it Chalobah who didn't start that game? Was it Achapong who started and Chalobah came on? Or was it Tosin who came on?
Tosin came on for
So obviously they hadn't started the game together.
Yeah.
And they also hadn't been playing regularly together for a few weeks. And I just think when I looked back at that Sunderland second goal, it looked like two defenders who didn't quite know what the other one was going to do. It was like Chalobah was waiting because he assumed that Tosin would actually make a challenge.
Yeah.
And Tosin was waiting, not really sure what Chalobah was doing next to him. And I just think if you've got a central defensive partnership who are playing regularly together, week in, week out, they build that knowledge of each other. And very simplistic to say, I don't think that goal happens, though. I think one of them takes responsibility for the situation.
Yeah.
And I think between them, they know who's going to take responsibility, who's going to make the challenge, who's going to drop in, or who's going to sort of stand off. And it just doesn't happen. I thought that goal was a really good example of two defenders who, A, hadn't started the game together, but B, hadn't been playing regularly enough together as well. And I agree with you, Tosin's performances have dropped. He hasn't been great, quite frankly. And I thought, Chalobah and Fofana against Tottenham were excellent. And I do think if I was to pick my strongest one without Colwill in there, I'd be doing everything I could to really build that relationship. But then you have the added problem that you can't count on Fofana's fitness.
Right.
So it becomes really difficult. So that's the best way I can sum it up, really. I mean, Cucurella's obviously not a problem. He's fantastic. I think at right back, you know the options, and they're both good options. Reece James obviously was his first choice, defensively sound, really maturing, even more so, I think, becoming a very good captain. Gusto's shown himself to be a really decent backup now, actually, having gone through a tough period at times last season. So it's just that central pairing, but they haven't, and they can't get it quite right at the moment.
Yeah, we got a question from Blue London 1905 here for you, Matt, and I think it's around like expectations for the year. So it says, has anyone in or around the club given any sort of expectation for the season lately? Would getting back into the Champions League, making a decent run, let's say, into the quarters in it this year and winning the League Cup be a quote unquote success?
I don't think the League Cup will come into any particular judgment from the club on the manager. Obviously, they go into every trophy wanting to win it, and they do want cup runs. They want cup runs. But put it this way: if Pochettino had won the Carabao Cup, I don't think it would have made any difference to his Chelsea future. And that's the same for all clubs. I don't think any Premier League club judges a manager's performance on the Carabao Cup. Quite frankly, it's a nice bonus. Don't get me wrong; they'd love to win it, but it's not going to impact the manager's future. So at the start of the season, I was pretty much told that the sort of loose start of season target would be they need to qualify for the Champions League again, and they want a run in the Champions League, and they want to compete in it. So obviously, going out in the group league phase would be very bad, or not qualifying for the top 8 and then going out in that sort of playoff round, I think would also be probably judged a failure. If you get to the last 16, I think then it all becomes about the draw and circumstance. It's too difficult to sort of predict.
A bit of luck involved in
Exactly.
any cup run,
Yeah. So that becomes difficult to prejudge. But before the last 16, if they go out before the last 16, I think it would be deemed a disappointment. If they don't qualify for the Champions League for next season, quite frankly, I think Enzo would be in trouble because I think that would be seen as a step backwards. And I think the domestic cups, they'd love to have a run in it. They know how important trophies are to fans, but I don't see a domestic cup impacting his future. The other thing I would say, and this became clear last season, is I think what they tend to do is reassess the target around early March. I mean, we saw all the back and throw with were they meant to get in the Champions League, and that was farcical. But they will reassess the target because obviously, if they're at the start of March, 3 points off the top and right in that conversation for winning the Premier League, then you can't just target top 4 from there. Do you know what I mean? Similarly, if you're 6th and 6 points off 4th, then the only target becomes getting that 4th place. So the target will get reassessed slightly end of February, beginning of March. But at the moment, that's it. The Champions League at the moment is the sort of the earliest barometer because we'll know in February whether he's got through to the last 16 or not.
Okay. Yep.
Because obviously, if you end up in those playoff matches, but come sort of February, whenever those playoff matches are, we'll either know that they finished in the top 8 and got there automatically, and I think that would be seen as a good success to start with, or they've got into that playoff round and either succeeded or failed in it. And I don't think he'd get the benefit of in that playoff round. I don't think he'd get the benefit of if they got a tough draw because at the end of the day, he's ended up in that round. And, he's sort of made his own bed.
Yeah. I mean, I also think in the league, you'll have a better idea in February, kind of what is actually going on after this run of fixtures.
Yeah, after Christmas, after
Yeah.
post-international break, after the so-called busy Christmas period, I think that's the time to look at that table. It's mad at the moment. I mean, you can drop from sort of 12th to from like 4th or 5th to 12th within like a win or a defeat. And that will probably remain the case for the next month too, just because of how concertinaed it is. And then after Christmas, I think probably we'll know a top 8. We'll know who within that top 8 are really chasing for the top 4 as well, probably, and who's in the actual title race.
Yeah, because we're not even a third of the way through the season yet, right? So I mean, you're looking at this in a 38 game season, and you're like, who knows after 11 games? I mean,
exactly.
Let's talk injuries because we have to because it is Chelsea. Just a few news and notes to start this one. Pedro Neto obviously withdrew from Portugal international duty with kind of a nagging groin injury. It feels like perhaps just a precaution, but any word on him or his status?
Chelsea have done well actually at building relationships with national FAs. They've done well at managing to get agreements with national FAs to have players taken out for precautions or rested at the right time. They seem to be good at that. I assume that's the sporting directors who have to build those relationships, so give them a bit of credit there. I think it's exactly that. I think it's precaution. They've always, since Pedro Neto joined, it's easy to forget actually that he was very much on one of those lists of players who, obviously not at Chelsea but at Wolves, he hadn't really ever played a full season.
Yeah, knock on
His
wood.
in,
He's
yeah,
been healthy.
his injury record at Chelsea has been actually incredible given his injury history. I mean, everyone thought they'd signed an injury-prone player, as you say, knock on wood. So I think there's some precaution there. I don't get the sense anyway. I don't know, but I don't get the sense that that is something that anyone should be worried about moving forwards. But they have always been quite. I know that his fitness and how they manage him has been something since the day he signed that they've worked hard on.
Uh, Separate of that, but kind of a different story. You look at Enzo Fernandez, who kind of disclosed, "Hey, been struggling for a while now, a few months
Yeah,
with this knee." Obviously, I think it's kind of an eye test thing too. You can kind of
yeah.
tell
Moresca's
mobility.
talked about it as well.
Yeah, he is kind of in this weird spot because of where the midfield is. Him and Caicedo are both kind of
Playing all the time.
maybe not at their peak fitness in
Yeah.
terms of having to play every single game. What do you make of this? Is this something he's just gonna have to manage all season, or is this something where he's gonna need like extended time?
Feels like they're trying to manage it. Feels like they're trying to manage it. And it feels like they think they can manage it. A few Argentina players have actually pulled out of this squad. They've only got a friendly. I think it's against Angola. A few have been given a little bit of time off. Again, good management, club FA management between the two, and I think it's management. Yeah, and I think that they believe it's something they can manage their way through. He's having to play more than they'd probably have wanted him to, but so is Caicedo, and sometimes players just have to accept that. Talk back to the Frank Lampards and people, and I know the Premier League now is more physical and faster and whatnot, but players used to play, and players still do play 60 games a season or 50 odd games a season because some just have to, and you can't always be fully fit,
Yeah.
and that's going to happen.
This is all complemented by the fact that Romeo Lavia is hurt again, predictably, if you've been following this show. And Dario Sugo, who is kind of brought in to spell, is obviously on a longer term, quad injury. I mean, it's tough for Lavia, right? I mean, this is a guy who just kind of come back during this last stretch of games, started playing some important minutes, and goes down again.
Yeah, and it's, irony being as well, Moresca tried to do the right thing and rest Caicedo for a game, and a few
Exactly.
minutes in, he can't. So, when we talk about his rotation and his decisions, he's not always getting the luckiest breaks.
Yeah.
It tends to be with clubs, actually. That they get these little bursts of injuries in one position. Tottenham had this with their centre backs last season. Villa had it with their centre backs, and Chelsea seem to be having it with this position in midfield. That they're getting a lot of injuries in this position, and obviously injuries are bad. But if you had them spread through the squad, it's probably a bit easier to manage. I mean, people talk about, well, have they left themselves short in midfield, or should they buy another one in midfield? But it's like, how many of this profile of player can they have? I mean, they recognised in the summer that you can't count on Lavia by signing Asugo to be in there, and Asugo gets injured, and Asugo, Moresca's last update at the start of this month was, sometime in the new year. He didn't really get any more definitive than that. So Asugo doesn't sound like he's coming back anytime soon. And even when he does, he's never really played in the Premier League. He's had a long-term injury. It's kind of all set up for him to really need a slow integration, and you just can't count on Lavia. So it is a real problem. And then every time I go to Chelsea, there's a point in a match where I think, oh shit, Caicedo's injured. I'm not a
Yeah.
Chelsea fan, and I think it,
Yeah.
it shouldn't actually matter to me in a way, but I really love Caicedo, and obviously it helps me if Chelsea are doing better than worse in terms of my working life. And there seems to be a moment in every single match where I think, oh shit, he's injured. And it happened against Wolves. There was a moment against Wolves, I think in the first half, where he seemed to get banged on the knee. And he does that thing as well. He's got quite a weird gait,
Yeah.
walking style. I don't know whether that's to do with his the injury he had as a kid when he had a really bad ACL when he was a kid. But he's got a really weird sort of walking, running gait. So I always think when he gets a bang, it looks terrible because when he first gets up, he looks like he's limping away, almost like an old man sometimes. And you think he's going off. There's no way he's carrying on. And within a minute, he's charging up and down the pitch again. And we checked with Enzo at the end of the Wolves game, and he said, "I've asked him. Says he's fine." And it's like, you know, he's just a machine. And you're right, he doesn't always look fully fit, but even not fully fit, he's still a machine. But every single game, there's a moment where I think, oh shit.
Do Chelsea seriously have to consider looking at midfield though? I mean, if you are not able to count on Lavia and you haven't been able to count on Lavia, this is now 3 seasons worth of data or 2.5 seasons worth of data that you're working with, and Asugo's injury is serious. Like to have surgery on your quad is like not a
Yeah,
joke.
yeah.
Like I mean, turns out you need your quad to run. Um, that just leaves you with 3 midfielders for the end of the season. I mean, that seems awfully short unless you're willing to do something that you really haven't done consistently if you're Moresca, and that's trust an academy profile to come in and play real minutes
Yeah.
in that capacity.
I mean, look, they might, pure speculation, they might look if there's an opportunity in January, depending on what prognosis they get over Lavia and what they know internally that we don't know externally is Asugo, because if they feel come the end of December that they're in a fight for something in the Premier League, whether that be in a title fight or just a fight for the top 4, and that they're still very much alive in the Champions League, then you would look at it and think, kind of need to do something here just to sort of get through the season. But then what options? Uh, they don't like the January transfer window. You know, we joke about how much they love transfers, but actually, if you look recent history, they don't love the January transfer window. They don't feel that they can get what they want in the January transfer window. They don't like being forced into rash decisions. So it kind of feels unlikely, but it might be something they're forced to look at. I mean, obviously, we know that at the end of the summer transfer window, they were looking at sort of number 80 profiles. They ended up bringing Buonanotte in on loan, but that doesn't feel that that's helped that specific issue.
No.
So, yeah, it might be something they have to try and look at, but it's hard to see where they'd find something in January that would help them really.
Yeah, I think you just owe it to yourself to give
I
yourself
mean,
the best
obviously,
chance to win.
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, he's obviously looked quite a lot in his rotation at playing both Gusto in midfield and James in midfield, and there's been some success with that, and that might be the way they have to get through it while they manage injuries. But it's unfortunate, and it looks like Caicedo is going to have to play an awful lot of games if they're going to achieve what they want to achieve this season. It does look like Caicedo is going to have to stay healthy and play an awful lot of games within that.
So, some slightly better news: Cole Palmer and Benoit Badiashile may be on the mend and returning sometime after the international break. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Yeah, that's the hope. They're reluctant to sort of put timescales and firm things on it. I know, obviously, Moresca left a little dangle of the carrot of the Barcelona tie
I felt like
with
that was just like, man,
Cole.
come
Yeah,
on.
but he also, I mean, he's contradicted himself a little bit with his messaging over Cole because he gave out that little hint, but also couldn't really confirm that he would definitely play again this year as well. Like, you know, I don't think you can really read too much into what Moresca's saying there. I think the hope will be that he does return sometime after the international break, but I don't know quite when that is. It could be sooner, it could be later. He all I can say is he's on his way back. That seems to be the case. Badia Chile, I think that they're hopeful that he will get back sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
But he
yeah,
keeps having recurring injuries as well, to be honest with you.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of a same situation for some of these guys,
Yeah.
the return injuries.
The good thing is I don't think, you might disagree with me, I don't think I don't think any of their results can be put down to not having Cole. I think they've managed without Cole pretty well. I
I
know
think the
you.
Sunderland game is the one that I look at where you're like they
Yeah,
set up
maybe.
in a way that Cole Palmer is the guy that would
Yeah,
unlock a setup like that, and like that. I think you're going to face more of that, right? So I think
yeah,
not just in the previous fixtures, but coming up, like these are the sorts of things where if you had a healthy Cole Palmer at his like peak best, that
yeah.
he changes the way the team set up against
Yeah,
Chelsea.
he does. He
You
does,
know,
and they're clearly a much better team with him. I think they've been managing without him quite well. I don't think they've
I
let the
agree.
goal. The goals
I think
haven't
you've done
dried
it
up
okay.
without him,
Yeah.
and I certainly think they've been managing better with him this season than they could have done in the past. In the past, I think a lengthy Cole Palmer injury is an absolute season ender almost. It's like the world would have caved in. So I think there's some encouragement there, but yeah, obviously they want him back and they'll be a much better team with him. And you're probably right when I talk about the results. Maybe the Sunderland one is a good example.
Liam Delap working his way back to fitness.
Yeah, I mean he's fitness and also just getting kind of used to it. It's almost like he's having to start his Chelsea career and he looked like that against Sunderland. He looked out of sorts. He looked like someone who wasn't fully fit. He looked like someone who hadn't really played in that team very much, hadn't played in that environment very much, and he's probably kind of having to start again. It was very instructive that at one stage during the first half, Moresca pulled him over in a break of play. Someone had gone down injured, and I think it was Gusto, and he spent quite a long time with Liam, and it was very clear afterwards that Liam was then pulling out a bit wider and getting the ball a bit more, because before he'd just been sort of standing up front through the middle, just not really seeing anything of the ball. So it looked from that like that's a very small sample size. It might be that he plays against Burnley and scores 2 goals and looks incredible, but from what we saw against Wolves, I just think it looks like he'll need a little bit of time to play his way back in. And the international breaks come at a bad time for him because he'd have wanted a bit of momentum and continuity.
Well, hopefully, knock on wood, we'll get it after the break.
Yeah.
Can we just dive into a few other things? I know every time we do these uh, sorts of reports that we talk about stadium in front of shirt sponsor. You said before we joined, not much going on there. Care to elaborate?
Front of shirt sponsor, I mean, there's really been no update whatsoever. I mean, look, I've said this before. Like, it's embarrassing. It's
It
it's
is.
hard. It's hard now to accept any real justification for. I feel like I've tried to be quite understanding of the situation in the past. That they've
Mhm.
been holding out for the best deal. They've been holding out to get in the Champions League. They didn't want to sign a long-term deal while they weren't in the Champions League. Get that. Get at the start of the season that look, we're confident we're going to get a long-term one now, and it's not going to be done at the start of the season, but it will be done. But where is it, guys? Like, come on,
Yeah.
they've made some pretty bold statements in the past about the way the club was run in the past, but it's embarrassing not to have a front of shirt sponsor. It's also, I think I brought it into the conversation around ticket prices and things like that.
Mhm.
You can't tell fans they have to pay top dollar for various things and to just suck it up when you're not maximizing an obvious income stream, and you're not sorting it out on that score. They've got a sleeve sponsor, which I suppose is a little bit of progress. Can the front of shirt sponsor be done? Do they have to wait for these charges from the Premier League to actually drop and the punishment be known? No one at the club will actually confirm that to me. It seems like a decent theory, but ultimately other people say that wouldn't necessarily stop stop it being agreed with various clauses being put in. But it needs sorting. It's embarrassing, a club of Chelsea size and stature and what they say they should be. It needs sorting. I can't defend it anymore. I can't come up with excuses for it anymore. Like I said, I think everyone's been fairly patient with it, but it's like
2.5 seasons minus a few games at the end of last year with that one. I mean, it's
yeah,
bonkers.
it's mental. It's mad. It's mental. And either they're asking for stupid money, and they just need to get real. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the Tottenham stadium sponsor situation under Daniel Levy. How long have they been in that stadium? It's still not called anything because Daniel Levy was basically asking for world record money for it. Well, if Chelsea have been asking for like world record money on their front of shirt or excess money, they just need to get real and they need to do a deal. Because it's ridiculous. So I can only give an opinion on that, though, because there's no firm updates. Stadium. So last time we spoke on it, it was thought that in November, it's not thought, there is a planning meeting in November. It was thought that Earl's Court was on that agenda. I've since been told there's a little bit of doubt over whether Earl's Court is on that agenda or whether Earl's Court's going to be part of an agenda later down the line, maybe in December at another planning meeting. So there's a little bit of mystery around that. Maybe at the end of November we will know whether Earl's Court had been on that agenda or not. Past that, no real update. I spoke about it last time about that they do risk being left behind slightly because other clubs have plans. But on the other hand, it's a huge decision. There's no point, they just can't rush into a decision. And there's this sort of mystery about whether Earl's Court will be available or not. I struggle to see another site. There has been murmurings that maybe there's this other mystery site other than Earl's Court that they've got their eye on, but I haven't really heard anything about that past the murmurings and the rumours, and I can't sort of give any clarity on that, I'm afraid. So sorry, not a lot to say other than opinion.
CFC Central and Craig J with those questions. Let's dive into something that is a bit more serious here, which is Raheem Sterling and his family were victims of burglary again. This is not obviously the first time this has happened. Family members were home this time, which is traumatic in so many different ways. If you've been a victim of burglary while you were there or not, it is still a terrible thing.
Yeah, horrible.
And it does. I mean, after the first time, you're like, man, maybe that was a coincidence. Doesn't feel coincidental in the same way after multiple instances. What are your thoughts about this? I mean, obviously the guy's not been having a great time on the pitch, but it seems to be just having a really tough time off of it.
It's shocking. It must be horrendous. As you said, whether you're a victim of burglary when you're in, which would be really horrendous, but even if you're not at the house, very horrendous as well, very intrusive. This burglary was at a different address to the first burglary, which was closer to the training ground. Chelsea had a real spate of them, actually. Cucurella was a victim of it at a time when Cucurella was going through a really tough time. He didn't want to make it public at the time, but that fed into that and was really tough. I think, and I really apologise if I get this wrong, I think Chilwell might have been as well at one stage. But there was a real spate. They were clearly in that sort of area radius around the training ground. They were clearly, obviously getting targeted, very obviously. Sterling doesn't live in that area anymore, and it still happened to him again. And it will have been a huge shock. It will have been hugely destabilizing. And quite frankly, as well, look, it happened to him last time when he was on World Cup duty with England, and his career was still at quite a high point. It's not ridiculous to say that you can pretty much chart Sterling's career going downhill at that first burglary. He left England duty at the World Cup, as you would, to go and check on his family. He missed an England match to do it. He came back. I think he made a substitute appearance then in the France game that England got knocked out of. Basically not played for England again after that. That's basically his England career done. And his Chelsea career has gone downhill since. And I don't know whether that has impacted that, but if it has, you can't really blame the guy. You know, if all of a sudden your confidence is stripped away from leaving your family or leaving your house because you're worried you could get burgled, it could impact your career. You know, if I was away at a World Cup and I got burgled, whether my family were in or not, I would fly straight home. And would I want to go to the next World Cup? Maybe not, because obviously it'd be in your head what happened last time.
Right.
So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that his career has been badly impacted by that first burglary, because just charting it would seem to have been at guess, and then to have it happen again must be devastating for him. Absolutely devastating. It must be really hideously unsettling for him as well. It's shocking. So, I mean, Raheem Sterling doesn't care what I think, but obviously thoughts
Yeah,
massively go
of
out to
course.
him and his family, and all you can have is massive sympathy for the guy.
Yeah. There's no easy transition off of that. I do just want to do a couple of quick January transfer
Yeah,
rumors, if you don't mind.
yeah, let's go. Raheem
Um,
Sterling.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, are there any members of the squad that are looking for outs in January that aren't kind of the most obvious picks?
Not in the first team rotation, I don't think. I don't get the sense that anyone in that rotation is happy with their sort of minutes within the and unhappy enough with their minutes within that rotation to that takes in a lot of players to look away. So I don't think so in that sort of first team squad, as it were.
Okay. Um. Oh, Boogie NYC asks, can you squash the Rodrigo to Chelsea rumor?
Yep, I can. Squashed
All
it.
right,
Not
squashed. It's
happening.
done.
Won't happen. I really, really, really hope this doesn't come back to bite me, but I can't see any world in which Rodrigo becomes of interest to Chelsea. Salary, position, recent history of how his career's gone, also the players that Chelsea have invested in similar positions. Don't see it at all.
Don't worry, Matt. This won't be seen by anybody, so you're safe here. Um, BS Owl asks, could Chelsea move for Endrick at Madrid, maybe on loan?
No, don't see it. I've seen that rumor and I've been told to ignore it. So I'm going to ignore the rumor and say with some degree of confidence that no, don't think so. I think he's joining Leon actually on loan anyway. I think that's well down the line. But obviously they went for Endrick back in the whenever it was. They ended up with Esteval. Not bad if you were going to pick between them at the moment.
Sure,
And
sure.
at the time, you kind of thought maybe that Esteval might be the sort of one they got because they didn't get Endrick. But in actual fact, that I feel they've got the real star. So yeah,
Okay.
I don't see Endrick playing with Esteval at Stamford Bridge.
Sorry to Jess and Nat, our Brazilian contingent on that one. Jay asks, are there any loan players that Chelsea are considering bringing back in January?
Can't think of any. No, not to play. I mean, whether they bring back loan players to then re-loan out because they're unhappy with their loans, maybe a different conversation. But no, none that I can think of. I mean, just to go back to in terms of outgoing, could Gooey go out on loan again? Because is he allowed to? Could he go back to Sunderland?
that is just
Confusing,
so
very
many
confusing.
layers, so
Yeah,
many layers to that.
but it doesn't feel like Moresca has much faith in him because even though he's had him there to try and play, could Tyreek George go? Uh, they're the only two. I should have mentioned them when I've just been thinking about it as we spoke. So Gooey and Tyreek George, potential question marks over. Tyreek George clearly, I think, would like to play a little bit more,
Yeah.
and Gooey probably doesn't feel a lot of faith. So just to correct myself on that last answer, on the answer about loan players coming back, not to play. I don't have a list of them in front of me. Don't think so.
Any truth to the DSC reintegration rumors, or is he completely
I don't know
done?
where's a reintegration rumor come from. I mean, I know he played for the under-21s. I haven't seen a reintegration rumor. No. Chelsea have a duty of care with both Disasi and Sterling and other players, I should add, to give them opportunities to not just train properly, but
Yeah, but
also
to
opportunities
play.
to play football. That
Yeah.
came out around a story about the PFA wanting a few assurances over Sterling. And this would be part of it. They will basically give the players the option because they are, they have a duty of care to the player, and part of the way of keeping them fit is to offer them the chance to play. I think it says a lot about Disassi's character. I think it speaks well of Disassi that he's willing to do that because, a lot of people will have had a lot of fun with that on social media and stuff and call it embarrassing and laugh at him. But fair play to him. He obviously wants to do everything he can to keep himself fit enough for a January move, I would suspect, not to be reintegrated. Moresca's made it very clear he's not getting reintegrated. He wants to be in the best possible place to try and get a January move and continue his career. So I say hats off to him. He looks in good shape, actually. It looks like he's lost a little bit of weight. I don't know how he played, but just the pictures, he looked in good shape. So I think that's what that's about. I haven't really seen a rumour about reintegration into the first team, and I wouldn't expect that at all.
Yeah, I think in moments of difficulty, professionalism is something you really either have or you don't. And
Yeah, everyone tells me at Chelsea and at Villa, because I've obviously spoken to people about Villa at the moment. The thing you always get back on Disassi is apparently a great guy, really liked in dressing rooms, really liked by high people at the club in terms of his character. He's apparently a really, really good guy, and that I think shows in this that he was humble enough to play in that game, and he would have known that there'd be a bit of piss taking around it, but he's bigger than that.
Last one has to be a fun one. STL Champy says, in Matt's opinion, what would be the best beer to pair with a Greg's sausage roll? Asking for a friend.
I mean, that is a dreadful combination.
I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, am I missing something here? Is
Let,
that like a combination that's thought to be? That is a dreadful
let,
combination.
let's pretend that this person doesn't have access regularly to a Greg sausage roll and that this
Oh,
is,
look,
you know,
whoa.
yeah,
I
yeah.
will not have anything said against the Greg sausage
I'm
roll.
not, no, I'm just
Yeah,
saying doesn't have access regularly to a Greg
yeah.
sausage roll. That's,
See, I can't imagine having a Greg sausage roll with anything but like a coffee, to be honest with you. Um, the thought of having it with a beer, and you know that I love my beer, although
be our Greg sommelier, Matt. Come on.
yeah,
Hit us with the right tasting notes.
I don't. Well,
It's the exasperation. STL champ, you have no idea what you've done to this man.
I mean, you would have to go for something quite sort of rich and I don't know, like some sort of stout. A stout. I think a sausage. I see. I've had. There's one of my favourite pubs in London that I've talked to you about before. It's called the Southampton Arms, and that is
Yes.
famous for selling pork pies. And a pork pie and a beer I like and I can get on board with. And a pork pie goes very well with like a very sort of rich stout. I've not tried. I don't think I've ever had a sausage roll with a beer, but I'm going to go on that theory. So I'm going to say a very rich, warm stout on the pork pie theory.
Bam. There we go. Well,
There you
Matt,
go.
glad we ended on just a real terrible question there. But
Well, it's a
STL Champy, you
good
have
question.
you
Good
have
question
yours.
because it's kind of I like a question that prompts debate and reaction, and it prompted a debate and reaction. So
All right.
it was a
So
good question in a way.
for future lightning round questions, STL Champion has set the bar very high
Yeah, that
for
is.
a
Yeah, it's a good
reaction.
bar.
There
Yeah,
you
it's a
go.
good bar.
Well, Matt, thank you. We hope to see you obviously while we are over in December, and we will be talking to you again, I think next week.
For
As
sure. Yeah,
Chelsea
next week. Yeah, for
head
sure.
back
Ahead of
into
a
this
very big week coming after that. Yeah.
huge week coming.
Yeah.
So, obviously, thanks everyone for supporting the show, and we will be back with many more episodes. But until then, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.